Hugo stared at the door, watching the familiar sunlight spill through the cracks. It was Saturday, but his father's voice echoed in his mind, commanding him to get serious about the future. Hugo knew that the weight of his family's legacy was heavy on his shoulders. Since he was a child, his parents had planned his future. Business school, joining the family company, and eventually becoming the next CEO of their multi-generational conglomerate. He had always known what his life would look like, until Zara came into the picture. It wasn't love at first sight. No, it was something deeper, something unexpected. Hugo had never met someone who made him question everything he had been told about the world. Zara's words sparked something in him, something that had been buried deep under the layers of expectations. She wasn't like the other students in school, who were content to follow the routine. Zara was passionate about the environment, about making a real difference in the world, and she had a fire in her eyes that Hugo couldn't ignore. When she spoke about saving the forests, protecting wildlife, and tackling climate change, Hugo's world shifted. The life he thought he had to live began to feel small in comparison to the vast world Zara was so determined to change. Hugo had seen Zara around school, her dark curls always in disarray, her worn jeans and eco-friendly t-shirts giving her a rebellious air. But it wasn't until that fateful day in the school's cafeteria that their worlds collided. Zara had been arguing with a group of students about the importance of reducing plastic waste. Her voice, confident and unwavering, stood out amidst the chatter of students who seemed more interested in their phones than in the future of the planet. You can't keep ignoring the evidence. The planet is dying. Zara's voice rose, catching Hugo's attention. She was standing at the edge of a table, holding a plastic bottle in her hand, as if it were a symbol of the world's apathy. Hugo, always reserved, couldn't help himself. He stood up and approached, his curiosity piqued. But it's just one bottle. It's not like it will make a difference if I don't recycle. Zara turned to him, her eyes narrowing. That's exactly the problem. It's everyone's just one bottle mentality that's destroying the planet. Hugo had never been one for confrontation, but something about Zara's passion ignited a spark inside him. I don't know. I'm not sure what I can do. I'm supposed to take over the family business. That's what my dad wants. That's what they expect. Zara's expression softened, and she smiled faintly. Sometimes, what we're expected to do isn't what's right for us. What if your purpose is bigger than just business? What if it's about saving something that's worth saving? The conversation with Zara lingered in Hugo's mind long after he left the cafeteria. He had always believed that following his father's footsteps was his destiny, but Zara's words made him wonder. Was that all there was to life? Could he, a simple high school senior, really make a difference? The next few days, Hugo couldn't focus on anything. His mind wandered to Zara's environmental group meetings, the ones she had invited him to join. Despite his reservations, he felt drawn to her cause. Hugo was familiar with the power of business. He had seen it in his father's meetings, his mother's late nights working on company plans. But he had never considered using it for something bigger than profits. Zara caught up with him the following week after class. "Have you thought about what I said?" she asked, the curiosity in her voice unmistakable. Hugo hesitated. "I don't know if I can just walk away from everything my family's worked for. It's all I know." She nodded understandingly. "I get it. But what if your legacy wasn't just about money? What if it was about creating a future for everyone, not just your family?" That night, Hugo sat in his room, staring out of his window at the sprawling city below. He thought about Zara's words. Could he really step away from everything he knew and fight for something bigger? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this was his chance to be part of something meaningful. It wasn't long before Hugo found himself attending Zara's environmental group meetings. They met at the local community center, a small, worn-out building that looked as if it had seen better days. But there was something magical about the space, a feeling that anything was possible within its walls. Zara stood at the front, presenting her latest idea for a community cleanup project. "We've all seen the garbage piling up in the streets, right?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of urgency. "It's time we did something about it. Let's take action, not just talk about it." Hugo raised his hand, a rare moment of confidence surfacing within him. "What if we could take this to the next level? What if we got the local businesses involved? We could create a system that incentivizes recycling." Zara's eyes lit up. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need, Hugo. Let's do it." The room erupted in applause, and for the first time in his life, Hugo felt as though he was part of something that mattered. This wasn't about wealth or power. It was about making a real difference in the world. As Hugo became more involved with Zara's group, he began to see the challenges they faced. Not everyone was as passionate about the environment as Zara was. Many students still treated the issue like a distant concern, something that didn't affect them directly. But there was another challenge that Hugo hadn't anticipated: the resistance from his own family. His father, a powerful business tycoon, had already begun making plans for Hugo to join the family company after graduation. When Hugo finally sat down with him to discuss his newfound passion, his father's reaction was predictable. "You're wasting your time," his father said, his voice cold and stern. "The world doesn't change by picking up trash. It changes with power, with money. You need to focus on your future in the business, Hugo. Don't throw it all away for some naive ideal." Hugo felt a wave of frustration wash over him. Was this really the path he was destined to walk? Could he truly choose between his family's expectations and the cause he now felt so deeply for? Zara was there for him, as always. "You have to fight for what you believe in," she told him, her voice gentle but firm. "The world needs people like you, people who have the power to change things. Don't let anyone make you feel small for trying to make a difference." Hugo knew then that his path wasn't going to be easy, but he wasn't about to give up. Not now, not after everything he had learned from Zara. The project that Hugo and Zara had started to create gained traction. More students began joining their environmental efforts, and local businesses started taking notice. But it wasn't until they partnered with a local recycling company that things began to shift. The partnership allowed the group to introduce a citywide recycling program, complete with drop-off stations and public awareness campaigns. Hugo worked tirelessly, using the business skills he had learned from his father's company to organize meetings, gather resources, and ensure the program ran smoothly. But the real turning point came when Hugo realized that the fight wasn't just about the environment. It was about a future where people worked together for a common good. He had always been told that success was measured by wealth, but now he understood that success could also be measured by the positive impact you have on the world. And so, Hugo's journey to self-discovery and purpose continued. Each day was a new challenge, but with Zara by his side, he felt like he could change the world. The days blurred together as Hugo and Zara worked on their project. With each passing week, Hugo felt himself becoming more immersed in the world of environmental activism. It wasn't just about picking up trash anymore. It was about changing the narrative, about creating a movement that would inspire others to take responsibility for their planet. The more Hugo learned from Zara, the more his perspective on life shifted. Zara wasn't just a passionate activist, she was a force of nature. Her dedication was unyielding, and her enthusiasm was contagious. Hugo found himself looking forward to their meetings, their late-night brainstorming sessions, and the way Zara's eyes would light up when they came up with new ideas. It wasn't just the project that was growing, it was their bond. One evening, as they sat on a park bench after a long meeting, Hugo looked at Zara, his mind filled with questions he hadn't been able to voice before. "Zara," he began, hesitating. "Why do you do this? I mean, you could have done anything. You could have had a normal life, gone to college, worked for a big company. Why this?" Zara smiled, the setting sun casting a warm glow on her face. "Because, Hugo, I can't sit back and do nothing when I know the world is dying. It's easy to ignore the problems when they don't affect you directly, but that doesn't make them go away. I do this because it matters. I do this because we have to fight for what's worth saving." Hugo nodded, his heart swelling with admiration for her. He had always known what his future was supposed to look like: business, power, wealth. But Zara had opened his eyes to something entirely different. She had shown him that there was a deeper purpose to life. And now, Hugo wasn't just fighting for a cause. He was fighting for a future that he could shape alongside Zara. The citywide recycling initiative that Hugo and Zara had started was beginning to show results. More people were participating, businesses were donating, and awareness was spreading. Hugo felt a sense of pride every time he walked through the city and saw the recycling bins placed in strategic locations, or when a business owner approached him to talk about how they were reducing waste. But the breakthrough came when they were invited to present their project at a local environmental summit. It was a huge opportunity, an opportunity to showcase their work on a larger scale and perhaps inspire other cities to follow suit. Hugo's heart raced when they received the invitation. This was it. This was the moment that could make all the difference. When the day of the summit arrived, Hugo stood next to Zara, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They had worked tirelessly on their presentation, and now it was time to share their vision with the world. Zara, as always, was calm and collected, her voice steady as she spoke to the crowd about their project. Hugo, on the other hand, felt a knot in his stomach. But when he took the microphone and began speaking, he felt something shift inside him. This wasn't about pleasing his family anymore. It wasn't about fulfilling someone else's expectations. This was his story, his journey, and he was finally living it. As he spoke about the impact of their project, the importance of sustainability, and the power of collective action, Hugo knew he had found his purpose. The room erupted in applause when they finished. Hugo could hardly believe it. This was more than just a project. It was a movement, and they were at the forefront of it. Zara turned to him with a proud smile, her eyes shining. "We did it, Hugo. This is just the beginning." As Hugo's involvement with the environmental movement grew, so did the tension with his family. His father, ever the businessman, couldn't understand why Hugo was wasting his time on something that wasn't going to bring in money. The arguments between them became more frequent, more heated. "You've lost focus, Hugo," his father would say. "You're supposed to be preparing to take over the company. This environmental nonsense is a distraction. You're throwing away everything I've worked for." Hugo knew that his father's words were meant to push him back onto the path that had been laid out for him. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he couldn't go back. His passion for the environment had changed him. He couldn't just go through the motions of a business career anymore. He had to do something that mattered. "I'm not throwing anything away," Hugo would reply, his voice steady but firm. "I'm building something new. I'm doing what's right for the world. And I'm not going to stop just because it's not what you expect." But his father wouldn't hear it. The rift between them grew wider, and Hugo felt torn between his loyalty to his family and his newfound purpose. It was as though he was standing at a crossroads, unable to turn back but unsure of what lay ahead. Zara, sensing Hugo's inner turmoil, was there to support him. "You don't have to choose between your family and your purpose, Hugo," she said one night, as they sat under the stars. "But you do have to choose to be true to yourself. Your family loves you, but they can't make your decisions for you. Only you can do that." As the project gained momentum, Hugo and Zara began to think bigger. They wanted to take their recycling program nationwide. They reached out to government officials, businesses, and schools, trying to build a network of support. But the challenges were enormous. There were bureaucratic obstacles, funding issues, and resistance from industries that were invested in polluting the environment. But despite the setbacks, Hugo felt more determined than ever. He realized that change didn't come easy. It was a long, hard road filled with obstacles, but that didn't mean it wasn't worth fighting for. He had seen the difference their efforts had made in their city, and now he was ready to take on the country. One day, while preparing for a meeting with a potential sponsor, Hugo turned to Zara. "What if we fail? What if all of this doesn't work?" Zara smiled, her confidence unwavering. "Failure isn't the end. It's just part of the journey. If we believe in this, then we have to keep pushing forward. The world needs us." Hugo nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Zara was right. They had come this far, and they couldn't stop now. Together, they would fight for the future of the planet, no matter how difficult the journey. The more Hugo and Zara pushed forward with their plans, the more they realized they needed help. They reached out to environmental organizations, local activists, and even fellow students who shared their vision. Slowly, their movement began to grow. As Hugo attended meetings, spoke to different groups, and negotiated with businesses, he began to see the power of collective action. This wasn't just their fight anymore. It was a movement of people from all walks of life, coming together for the same cause. And then one day, a major corporation that had been resistant to change reached out to them. They wanted to partner with Hugo and Zara on a nationwide campaign to reduce plastic waste. It was a huge win, one that showed that change was possible, even in industries that had long ignored environmental concerns. Hugo looked at Zara, his heart pounding. "This is it, isn't it? We're really doing this." Zara grinned, her eyes filled with pride. "Yes, Hugo. We're changing the world." With their partnership secured, Hugo felt a sense of hope that he hadn't felt in months. He knew that this was only the beginning. The journey was long, and the road ahead was uncertain, but with Zara by his side, Hugo was ready to face whatever challenges came next. The partnership with the major corporation was a milestone, but Hugo and Zara both knew that it wasn't the end of the road. It was merely the beginning. The nationwide campaign to reduce plastic waste was a massive project, and there were still many hurdles to overcome. The corporate world wasn't as easy to navigate as Hugo had once imagined, and the compromises that came with corporate involvement weighed heavily on his conscience. The first signs of tension appeared when the corporation pushed for a more marketable version of the campaign, something that would sell products while promoting environmental awareness. "We need to make sure the message is aligned with our branding," the CEO said in one of their meetings. "Let's focus on how this campaign can help boost sales while still supporting the environment. People like to feel good about the products they buy. Let's use that." Hugo and Zara exchanged glances, their unspoken concern filling the space between them. Hugo knew that compromising the campaign's integrity would dilute their message. They weren't in this for the sales or for any personal gain. They were in it to create real, lasting change. "Should we push back?" Hugo asked Zara later that evening. He didn't want to lose the momentum, but he couldn't shake the feeling that their cause was being hijacked. Zara was quiet for a moment before answering. "We need to stay true to what we believe in, Hugo. If we let them water down the message, we'll lose the very reason we started this in the first place. Let's fight for what's right." Hugo's heart raced as he made the decision. "Then we fight. We're not compromising." They would have to stand their ground, no matter how difficult it was. Hugo and Zara went to work, organizing their arguments and preparing for the next big meeting with the corporation. They were determined to make it clear that the campaign needed to prioritize genuine environmental impact over profit. They weren't going to back down. The meeting was tense. Hugo stood at the front, flanked by Zara, both of them armed with data, research, and compelling arguments about the importance of environmental integrity in the campaign. They explained the long-term benefits of an authentic message and how corporate involvement could still lead to positive outcomes without undermining their cause. But the corporation's executives weren't ready to relinquish control. "You're asking for too much," one of the executives snapped. "The reality is that these campaigns need to sell products. We can't just focus on environmentalism without making it commercially viable. You'll be fighting an uphill battle if you don't see the bigger picture." Hugo felt a surge of frustration, but Zara, ever the calm one, stepped forward. "We are part of the bigger picture. We're not asking for your charity. We're asking you to use your resources to make a tangible difference. People are waking up to the need for change, and they won't support a watered-down version of the truth." The room fell silent. There was a palpable tension in the air. Zara's words lingered in the space, and slowly, the executives seemed to realize that they had underestimated the power of the cause they were dealing with. Finally, the CEO of the corporation leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "All right," he said, his tone reluctantly conceding. "We'll take a different approach. But understand, this will require more effort from your side as well. We can't afford to lose money on this, but we're willing to work with you." It wasn't a victory they had expected, but it was a win nonetheless. The corporation had agreed to adjust their approach, but only if Hugo and Zara remained involved and worked harder to maintain the integrity of the campaign. After the meeting, Hugo and Zara walked out of the building, their steps lighter than they had been entering. Zara grinned at Hugo. "See, I told you we could do this." Hugo laughed, shaking his head. "You were right. I guess I still have a lot to learn about standing up for what I believe in." Zara's smile softened as she looked at him. "We all have something to learn, Hugo. The important thing is that you're doing it. You're not just following in your father's footsteps. You're forging your own path." Hugo felt a surge of pride at her words. For the first time in his life, he was doing something that truly mattered. It wasn't just about the family business, or even the pressure to succeed. It was about changing the world, one small step at a time. Over the next few weeks, Hugo and Zara worked tirelessly to refine the campaign. They met with more local businesses, organized community events, and launched awareness programs in schools. The more they worked together, the more their connection grew. They became a team, each complementing the other's strengths. Zara's passion for the cause and Hugo's business acumen created a synergy that made their campaign stronger than ever. While Hugo was increasingly immersed in the environmental campaign, the strain with his family deepened. His father continued to push for him to take a more active role in the family business, constantly reminding him of the legacy he was meant to inherit. Hugo's mother, though more understanding, couldn't help but feel disappointed in his decision. "Hugo, I know you're passionate," his mother said one evening, her voice filled with concern. "But this is not how things work. Your father has built something incredible. He wants you to take it to the next level, not throw it away." Hugo's frustration boiled over. "I'm not throwing it away. I'm doing something that's bigger than business. This is about the future, about what we leave behind for the next generation. His mother sighed. I understand, but you can't just walk away from your responsibilities. You're not a child anymore, Hugo. You need to make a decision. Hugo felt torn. On one hand, he wanted to make his parents proud, to live up to the expectations they had for him. On the other, he couldn't ignore the call of the environment, a cause that had become his passion. He couldn't keep ignoring the fact that he was changing, evolving into someone different than the person they had envisioned. In the weeks that followed, Hugo and Zara's environmental campaign reached new heights. They secured even more sponsors, increased community participation, and began seeing real, tangible changes in local businesses' waste management practices. But despite all the success, Hugo still felt conflicted. The pressure from his family continued to weigh heavily on him, and he struggled to balance his two worlds. One evening, after a long day of meetings and events, Hugo sat down with Zara. He had always found comfort in her presence, but tonight, the weight of his family's expectations felt especially heavy. I don't know what to do, Zara, Hugo confessed, his voice heavy. I feel like I'm letting everyone down. My parents, my future, it's all slipping away. Zara looked at him with understanding in her eyes. I know it's hard, Hugo, but you're not letting anyone down. You're doing what's right. This fight for the environment, it's your legacy, and you don't have to do it alone. You have me. Hugo smiled, feeling the warmth of her words seep into his soul. I don't know where I'd be without you, he admitted. Zara leaned in, her hand resting gently on his. We're in this together. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. For the first time in months, Hugo felt a sense of peace. He still had a long road ahead of him, filled with challenges and tough decisions. But with Zara by his side, he knew he could face anything. As Hugo and Zara returned home, the world seemed to shift beneath Hugo's feet. His family had grown increasingly distant in the weeks leading up to the conference. His father's calls had become shorter, more impatient, as he pushed Hugo to return to his business obligations. And yet, Hugo knew that something had changed within him. He was no longer content to live in the shadow of his family's expectations. The day after his return, Hugo sat down with his father. I need to talk to you, Dad, he said, his voice steady but firm. His father didn't look up from his paperwork. What is it now, Hugo? I've made my decision. I'm not taking over the family business. The words hung in the air, thick with tension. His father's gaze lifted, his eyes hardening. You're making a mistake, his father said coldly. You can't just throw away everything we've built. You have responsibilities, Hugo. You can't keep playing with your little projects forever. Hugo stood tall, the weight of his decision lifting him. This isn't just a little project, Dad. This is my life. And I'm not going to spend it running a company I don't believe in. I'm going to make a difference, Dad. For the planet. For the future. For a moment, his father was silent. Then, with a sigh, he leaned back in his chair. I don't agree with you, Hugo. But you're old enough to make your own choices. Hugo nodded, his chest swelling with a mixture of relief and sorrow. He knew this wasn't the end of the conversation. It was only the beginning of a long road. But for the first time, he felt like he was truly free. Hugo and Zara continued their work with newfound energy. Their efforts to push for sustainable practices grew stronger, and soon they had expanded their reach to neighboring cities. Hugo's decision to follow his passion was now paying off in ways he hadn't imagined. The environmental movement had become more than a project. It was his life's work, and Zara was right there beside him, helping him every step of the way. In time, Hugo and Zara's efforts were recognized by more influential environmental organizations. They began to secure funding, support, and even political backing for their initiatives. It wasn't easy, but with every obstacle, they grew stronger. Hugo no longer worried about his father's disapproval. He had found something far more important: purpose, passion, and the chance to make a real difference in the world. As they sat in their office one late evening, looking over plans for their next big campaign, Zara turned to Hugo. This is just the beginning, isn't it? Hugo smiled, his eyes filled with determination. It's only just beginning. And with that, they continued their journey, knowing that together, they could change the world. As the months passed, Hugo and Zara's environmental campaign began to spark a ripple effect that spread beyond their local community. Their work reached national attention, drawing the interest of political figures, environmental groups, and even celebrities. People were starting to realize that Hugo and Zara's passion was contagious. Schools were adopting sustainability programs, Local businesses were implementing green practices, and more people were joining the movement. But even with the growing success, there were still those who doubted them. Some business leaders, particularly those who were invested in industries that contributed to pollution, began to push back, questioning the feasibility of widespread change. There were protests against their initiatives, claims that they were too radical, too expensive, or too disruptive to the status quo. Zara, always the optimist, was undeterred. "Don't listen to the noise, Hugo," she said one evening, as they sat together after a tense meeting with corporate executives. "It's the people who have nothing to gain that will try to bring us down. We have to stay focused." Hugo, exhausted from the constant battles, nodded. "I know, but sometimes it feels like we're fighting a losing battle. They're all so powerful, Zara. How do we keep going?" Zara smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his. "By remembering why we started this. The ripple has already begun. And no matter how big the waves get, we have to keep pushing forward. The world is changing, Hugo. We're making it happen." And with those words, Hugo found the strength to keep moving forward, knowing that the fight was worth it. Hugo's decision to pursue his environmental work had caused a rift with his family, but as time passed, things began to shift. His mother, though still hesitant, began to see the value in his efforts. She came to a few of his meetings, attended rallies, and even met some of the people whose lives had been impacted by Hugo and Zara's work. Slowly, she began to understand that her son's path was not one of rebellion, but of passion and purpose. But his father remained steadfast in his opposition. Despite the progress Hugo had made, his father continued to view the business as the only legitimate path to success. The tension between father and son reached its peak one evening when Hugo's father called him into his office. "You've had your fun with these environmental games, Hugo, but now it's time to be serious. The company needs you," his father said, his voice hard. "I am serious, Dad," Hugo replied, his voice calm but firm. "This is my life. This is my future. And it's not just about business. It's about doing something that matters." His father's face turned red with anger. "This isn't about what matters. It's about survival. Your mother and I worked our entire lives to build this business, and you're throwing it all away." Hugo stood tall, his resolve unwavering. "I'm not throwing it away, Dad. I'm building something new, something that can change the world." His father shook his head in frustration. "I don't know who you are anymore." The conversation was a turning point. Hugo realized that he couldn't keep waiting for his father's approval. He had to walk his own path, regardless of the consequences. As Hugo and Zara's campaign gained momentum, they were approached by an influential organization that offered to partner with them on a global scale. This partnership would provide the resources and funding necessary to expand their efforts worldwide, but it came with its own challenges. The organization had connections with some industries that were not entirely in line with Zara's ideals, and there were concerns about whether they would compromise their message. Hugo and Zara sat down together to discuss the offer. Zara, ever the idealist, was cautious. "We've fought so hard to maintain our integrity, Hugo. What if partnering with them compromises what we stand for?" Hugo, who had come to realize the importance of making pragmatic decisions, was more open to the idea. "I know it's not perfect, but think about the reach. We can push for global change, and we have a chance to make real, lasting impact." Zara looked at him, conflicted. "I don't want to lose ourselves in the process." "We won't," Hugo replied, his voice steady. "We're the ones in control. We just have to stay true to our mission." Together, they made the decision to partner with the organization, but with strict guidelines to ensure that their message remained unchanged. They would use the resources at their disposal to amplify their voice and continue the fight for environmental justice. Years passed, and Hugo and Zara's work continued to flourish. Their partnership, both professional and personal, grew stronger with each passing day. They had traveled the world, spoken at international summits, and launched campaigns that were making a significant impact on the environment. More businesses were adopting sustainable practices, and governments were beginning to implement policies aimed at reducing carbon footprints and protecting natural resources. But through all the success, Hugo never lost sight of what mattered most: the cause. He had built a legacy that was not defined by wealth or status, but by the positive change he had brought to the world. He had chosen a path that was true to himself, one that allowed him to live a life of purpose. One evening, as Hugo and Zara stood on a hill overlooking the city, watching the sun set over the horizon, Hugo reflected on the journey they had taken. "I never imagined it would be like this," Hugo said quietly. I thought my life was set. I thought it was all about business, power, and success. But now, I know that this is what I was meant to do. This is my legacy. Zara turned to him, her eyes full of admiration. Your legacy is more than just the work we've done, Hugo. It's about the people you've inspired. It's about the future you're creating. You've built something that will last long after we're gone. Hugo smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle in his heart. We've done it together. This is our legacy. As they watched the sun dip below the horizon, Hugo knew that the fight was far from over. There would always be more to do, more challenges to face. But he was no longer the boy who had been uncertain about his future. He was a man who had found his purpose. And that was something no one could ever take away.